The stagecoach lurched to a halt outside the general store in Lordsburg, New Mexico territory, and Amelia Thornton pressed her gloved hand against her stomach, wondering if the nausea came from the rough journey or the terror of what she was about to do. The air was thick with dust, and the afternoon sun blazed mercilessly overhead as she stepped down onto the wooden sidewalk, her modest traveling dress already clinging to her skin beneath her coat. It was September of 1878, and the heat showed no signs of relenting despite the changing season. She carried only a single worn carpetbag, and the weight of a secret that could destroy everything before it even began. Samuel Dawson stood outside the livery stable across the dusty Main Street, his hat pulled low against the sun, watching the stagecoach with an intensity that made his ranch hand nudge him with an elbow. Samuel ignored the gesture, his dark eyes fixed on the woman descending from the coach. She was smaller than he had imagined from her letters, more delicate, with auburn hair pinned beneath a simple bonnet and a face that spoke of both determination and fear. He had sent for a mail-order bride out of practicality rather than romance. His ranch needed a woman's touch, and at 32 years old, he had grown tired of eating his own cooking and sleeping alone in a house too big for one man. Their correspondence over the past 6 months had been cordial, informative, and entirely devoid of the kind of passionate declarations he had read about in the dime novels his sister used to leave lying around. Amelia had seemed sensible, educated, and willing to make a life in the harsh territory. That had been enough for him. What he had not expected was the way his chest tightened when he saw her standing there, looking lost and brave all at once. Samuel crossed the street with long strides, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust. When he stopped in front of her, he removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the ends and a weathered face that bore the marks of years spent under the unforgiving sun. "Miss Thornton." His voice was deeper than she had imagined, rougher, but not unkind. "Mr. Dawson." She looked up at him, and he noticed her eyes were green, like the valleys back east that he barely remembered from his childhood. "I am pleased to finally meet you in person." There was something fragile in her voice, a tremor that made him want to reassure her somehow, though he was not a man accustomed to offering comfort with words. "The pleasure is mine, madam. I hope the journey was not too difficult." "It was long," she admitted, "but I am here now, and that is what matters." They stood there for a moment, two strangers bound by letters and promises, neither quite knowing what to say. The town bustled around them, indifferent to their awkwardness. A wagon rolled past, and somewhere a dog barked at nothing in particular. "I thought we might get you settled at the hotel for tonight," Samuel said finally. "Give you a chance to rest before we head out to the ranch tomorrow. The Reverend has agreed to perform the ceremony in the morning, if that suits you." Amelia nodded, grateful for the reprieve. "That would be most kind." He picked up her carpetbag as though it weighed nothing and gestured toward a building down the street. As they walked together, she noticed the way people watched them, curious but not unkind. A woman sweeping the porch of the boarding house smiled at her, and Amelia managed a small smile in return. The hotel was modest but clean, and Samuel had already arranged for a room. He set her bag down inside and lingered in the doorway, his hat in his hands again. "I will let you rest. There is a dining room downstairs if you get hungry. I will come by in the morning about 9 o'clock if that is agreeable." "Mr. Dawson," she said quickly before he could leave, "I must speak with you about something important before we proceed tomorrow." He turned back, and she saw wariness flicker across his face. "What is it?" Her courage failed her. Looking at him there, this solid, decent man who had paid for her passage and offered her a new life, she could not bring herself to shatter his expectations. Not yet. Not when she was exhausted and he was a stranger. "Never mind," she said softly. "It can wait until tomorrow, before the ceremony." Samuel studied her for a long moment, as though trying to decipher what she was not saying. "All right, then. Tomorrow." After he left, Amelia sank onto the bed and allowed herself to cry for the first time since leaving Philadelphia. She had fled the East with nothing but shame and loss following her, running from the pitying looks of neighbors who knew her story and the empty house where she had once dreamed of raising children. Her marriage to Thomas had been brief and unhappy, ending with his death from pneumonia after only 2 years. But it was what the doctor had told her afterward, when she had wondered why no child had come, that had truly broken her. "You will never bear children, Mrs. Thornton. I am deeply sorry." Those words had echoed in her mind for months, turning her grief into something darker. What use was a woman who could not give her husband children? When she had seen the advertisement for mail-order brides needed in the territories, she had responded impulsively, desperate for a fresh start. She had told herself she would explain everything to Samuel Dawson once she arrived, but as their correspondence had grown more frequent and more familiar, she had kept pushing the confession further away, telling herself there would be time. Now there was no more time. She washed her face in the basin and straightened her dress, determined to pull herself together. Tomorrow she would tell him the truth, and if he sent her back to Philadelphia, she would find some other way to survive. But tonight, she allowed herself to hope, just for a few more hours, that perhaps this strange new world might become home. Samuel walked back to the livery in a daze, his mind replaying every detail of their brief meeting. His ranch hand, Charlie, was waiting with their horses, a knowing grin on his weathered face. "She is prettier than you expected, is she not?" "Shut up, Charlie. I saw the way you looked at her, like you got kicked by a mule and liked it." Despite himself, Samuel felt heat creep up his neck. "I said shut up. Help me get these supplies loaded." They worked in silence for a while, loading sacks of grain and other provisions onto the wagon. Samuel had spent the past week preparing the ranch house, cleaning and organizing with an attention to detail that had amused his hired hands to no end. He had even attempted to make curtains for the bedroom window, though the result had been so catastrophic that he had ridden into town and purchased some ready-made ones from the general store. "You nervous about tomorrow?" Charlie asked as they finished up. "Should I be? Getting married is a big step, even if you have been writing letters back and forth." Samuel secured the last rope and climbed up onto the wagon seat. "She seems like a good woman, sensible. That is what matters out here. If you say so, boss." "But I saw her face too, and she looked like someone carrying a heavy burden. Just be prepared for whatever she might tell you." Those words stayed with Samuel through the evening and into the night, as he lay awake in his room at the boarding house where he had taken a bed for the night. What burden could Amelia Thornton be carrying? Had she lied about something in her letters? Was there some scandal that had driven her west? He realized, lying there in the darkness, that it did not matter as much as it should have. He had made her a promise, and Samuel Dawson was not a man who went back on his word. Whatever she needed to tell him, they would face it together. Morning came too quickly. Amelia dressed in her best dress, a pale blue cotton that had seen better days but was still respectable. Her hands shook as she pinned her hair, and she had to start over twice before she was satisfied with the result. She was putting on her bonnet when she heard the knock at the door. Samuel stood in the hallway, dressed in what was clearly his Sunday best, a dark suit that made him look both more formal and somehow more approachable. He held a small bouquet of wildflowers, slightly wilted but picked with obvious care. "I thought you might like these," he said, offering them to her with an awkwardness that she found oddly endearing. They are lovely. Thank you. She took them, their fingers brushing briefly, and felt a jolt of something she could not name. Before we go to the church, she said, her voice steadier than she felt, I need to speak with you. May we walk for a moment? They descended the stairs together and stepped out into the morning sunlight. Lordsburg was quieter at this hour, with only a few people moving about their business. Samuel offered his arm, and she took it, feeling the solid strength beneath the fabric of his coat. They walked to the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to scrubland, and the mountains rose in the distance, purple and magnificent against the pale sky. Amelia stopped and turned to face him, still holding the wildflowers. Mr. Dawson, I have not been entirely honest with you in my letters. His expression remained calm, though she saw his jaw tighten slightly. Go on. I was married before, as I told you. My husband died of pneumonia. But what I did not tell you was why I was so eager to leave Philadelphia, to start over so far from everything I knew. She took a deep breath, willing herself to continue. I cannot have children, Mr. Dawson. A doctor confirmed it after my husband died. I am barren. The word hung between them, ugly and final. She watched his face, waiting for anger or disappointment or disgust, but what she saw instead was something she could not quite interpret. Is that all? He asked quietly. Is that all? She stared at him. Mr. Dawson, I understand this changes everything. I should have told you sooner, I know that, but I was afraid and I needed to escape, and I thought perhaps if you met me first you might. She trailed off, realizing how foolish it all sounded. Samuel took off his hat and ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she would come to recognize as a sign he was thinking carefully about his words. Miss Thornton, Amelia, if I may. I am not going to pretend this news does not matter. Out here, children are a blessing, an extra pair of hands for the ranch, someone to leave the land to when we are gone. I would be lying if I said I had not thought about having sons and daughters someday. Her heart sank, and she nodded, preparing herself for rejection. But, he continued, and she looked up sharply, I have also spent the last 6 months getting to know you through your letters. You are intelligent, strong, and kind. You did not grow up out here, yet you were willing to take a chance on this hard land and on a stranger who needed a partner. That takes courage. He stepped closer, and she could smell the clean scent of soap and leather. If you cannot have children, then I will love only you, he said simply. We will build a life together, just the two of us, and that will be enough. More than enough. Amelia felt tears spring to her eyes. You cannot mean that. You do not even know me, not really. Then we will get to know each other, but I am not calling off this wedding because of something you have no control over. Unless, he added, a hint of uncertainty creeping into his voice, unless you have changed your mind about marrying me. No, she said quickly, almost desperately. No, I have not changed my mind, I just never expected such kindness. He smiled then, really smiled, and it transformed his weathered face into something almost boyish. Then let us go get married, Miss Thornton, before the Reverend gives up on us. The ceremony was simple, held in the small whitewashed church at the center of town with Charlie and the Reverend's wife as witnesses. Amelia's hand trembled as she placed it in Samuel's larger, calloused one, and when the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed her with a gentleness that made her breath catch. Afterward, they climbed onto the wagon Samuel had brought into town, loaded with supplies for the ranch. The ride out of Lordsburg took them through rolling hills dotted with mesquite and cottonwood trees, following a dusty road that seemed to stretch endlessly toward the mountains. The ranch is about 2 hours from town, Samuel explained as they rode. It is not the biggest spread in the territory, but the land is good and the water is reliable. I have about 300 head of cattle, and Charlie helps me run things along with 2 other hands who live in the bunkhouse. How long have you had the ranch? 7 years now. I bought it from a man who was heading back east. It was rough then, barely more than a shack and some fence posts, but I have built it up. She could hear the pride in his voice and found herself curious about this man she had just married, this stranger who had shown her more grace in one morning than anyone had in years. "What made you come out here?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the road ahead. "My family was from Missouri originally. After the war, there was not much left to go back to. My parents both passed from the fever, and my sister married a man heading to California. I wanted to make something of my own, build something that would last. The territory was opening up, and I heard there was opportunity for men willing to work hard." "You miss Missouri?" "Sometimes. Mostly I miss how green everything was. Out here you have to fight for every blade of grass." He glanced at her. "What about you? What made you answer my advertisement?" Amelia considered how much to reveal. "Philadelphia became a place of memories I wanted to escape. My husband was not a kind man, Mr. Dawson." "Samuel," she corrected herself. "Our marriage was not a happy one, and when he died, I felt more relief than grief. That shamed me. The neighbors knew, I think, and their pity was worse than their judgment. When I learned about my condition, it seemed like one more failure in a long list of them." "You are not a failure," Samuel said firmly, "and your late husband sounds like a fool." Despite everything, Amelia felt herself smile. "You did not know him. Any man who had you and made you unhappy was a fool. That is all I need to know." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, and Amelia found herself relaxing for the first time in months. The landscape had a stark beauty that appealed to something deep within her, and the man beside her, while still largely unknown, felt safe in a way she had not experienced before. The ranch came into view as they crested a small rise. It was more substantial than Amelia had expected, with a sturdy ranch house built of adobe and wood, a large barn, several outbuildings, and corrals where horses moved lazily in the afternoon heat. In the distance, she could see cattle grazing on the brown grass, and a windmill turned slowly, its blades catching the light. "This is your home now," Samuel said, and she heard the nervousness beneath his words as though he feared she might find it lacking. "It is beautiful," she said honestly. "I can see how hard you have worked." He helped her down from the wagon, his hands strong and sure around her waist, and for a moment they stood close together, neither quite ready to move. Then a door slammed and Charlie emerged from the barn, grinning widely. "Well now, congratulations to the happy couple. I got the house all warmed up for you, boss, and there is stew on the stove." "Thank you, Charlie. This is my wife, Amelia. Amelia, this is Charlie Winters, my foreman and the man who keeps this whole operation from falling apart." Charlie swept off his hat and gave a theatrical bow. "Pleased to make your acquaintance, Mrs. Dawson. I have been telling this old grump for years that he needed a woman around to civilize him." "I am only 4 years older than you," Samuel protested, but there was affection in his voice. Amelia laughed, and it felt good, natural. "I will do my best, Mr. Winters. Just Charlie, madam. We do not stand on ceremony much out here." Samuel showed her into the house, and Amelia looked around with genuine pleasure. The main room was spacious, with a stone fireplace, simple but sturdy furniture, and those curtains he had purchased hanging in the windows. Through one door she could see a kitchen with a good stove and a table, and through another, what must be the bedroom. "I know it is not fancy," Samuel began, but she cut him off. "It is wonderful, truly. In Philadelphia, I lived in a cramped apartment above a butcher shop after Thomas died. This is a palace in comparison." He looked relieved. "I want you to make whatever changes you like." Buy what you need from the general store in town, and Charlie can bring it out or we can go together. I want you to feel like this is your home." That night, they ate Charlie's stew around the kitchen table, and Amelia learned more about the rhythms of ranch life. The other two hands, a quiet man named Pete and a young fellow called Johnny, joined them, both shy and respectful in her presence. After dinner, the men retreated to the bunkhouse, and Amelia found herself alone with her new husband. The bedroom was simply furnished with a large bed, a dresser, and a washstand. Samuel hovered in the doorway, clearly uncertain about how to proceed. "I do not expect," he started, then cleared his throat. "That is, we do not have to, not tonight if you do not want to." Amelia turned to face him, this kind man who had given her a second chance. "Samuel, we are married. I understand what that means." "I know, but you have had a long journey and this is all very new and I do not want you to feel obligated." The words came out in a rush and she realized he was as nervous as she was. She crossed the room and took his hand. "I am nervous," she admitted, "but I want to be your wife in truth, not just on paper." He cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "I will be gentle. I promise." And he was. He unlaced her dress with careful fingers and laid her down on the bed as though she were something precious. He made love to her slowly, tenderly, whispering her name like a prayer. And when it was over, Amelia lay in his arms and felt the first stirrings of something that might, in time, become love. The weeks that followed established a rhythm to their days. Amelia woke before dawn to make breakfast for Samuel and the hands, strong coffee and eggs and biscuits that improved with practice. Samuel would kiss her forehead before heading out to work the cattle, and she would spend her days cleaning, mending, and slowly making the house into a home. She planted a small vegetable garden near the house, coaxing tomatoes and squash from the reluctant soil. She sewed new curtains for the kitchen and embroidered pillowcases for their bed. She learned to bake bread in the temperamental oven, and to make the strong, simple meals that the men preferred after long days of hard labor. In the evenings, after the hands had returned to the bunkhouse, Samuel would teach her about the ranch, pointing out different cattle and explaining his plans for expanding the herd. They would sit together on the porch and watch the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that took her breath away. At night, they would lie together in the darkness, and Samuel would tell her stories about his childhood in Missouri or ask her about her life in Philadelphia. Slowly, carefully, they were building something real between them. But Amelia could not shake the sadness that would sometimes wash over her without warning. She would see Charlie playing with a child in town, or she would pass by the bedroom that stood empty next to theirs, and the loss of what could never be would hit her anew. One evening, about 2 months after their wedding, Samuel found her crying in the garden. The sun was setting, and she was kneeling between the rows of vegetables, her hands dirty and her face wet with tears. He knelt beside her without a word and pulled her into his arms. She clung to him, sobbing out all the grief and shame she had been holding inside. "I am sorry," she gasped when she could finally speak. "I am so sorry I cannot give you children. You deserve more than this, more than me." Samuel pulled back and took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "Listen to me, Amelia. I meant what I said on our wedding day. You are enough, more than enough. Do you understand? But what about the ranch? What about when we are gone? Who will take over?" "I do not know," he admitted. "Maybe we will find someone to leave it to. Maybe we will sell it. Maybe it will not matter because we will have built a good life here together, just the two of us, and that is what counts. But I will not have you tearing yourself apart over something neither of us can change. How can you be so accepting of this?" He helped her to her feet and brushed the dirt from her dress. "Because I am falling in love with you. Amelia Dawson. Because when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I want to see is your face. Because you make this house feel like a home instead of just a place where I sleep. Because you are brave and strong and kind, and that matters more than anything else. She stared at him, her heart pounding. You love me. I am falling in love with you, he corrected gently. A little more each day, and I hope you might feel the same way about me. I do, she whispered. I did not expect to, but I do. You are nothing like Thomas. You are good and patient and honorable, and I do not know what I did to deserve you. He kissed her then, there in the garden with the last light of day fading around them, and it felt like a promise. Winter came to the New Mexico territory with cold winds and occasional snow that melted almost as soon as it fell. The cattle grew shaggy coats, and the men worked harder to keep them fed and healthy. Amelia learned to make thick stews and hearty soups that would stick to the ribs, and she knitted socks and mufflers for everyone on the ranch. Christmas arrived, and Samuel surprised her with a trip into Lordsburg. They attended a service at the church and had dinner at the hotel, a rare luxury. Afterward, they walked through the town, looking at the decorations in the shop windows. I have something for you, Samuel said, reaching into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small wooden box and handed it to her. Inside was a delicate silver locket engraved with flowers. Amelia gasped. Samuel, this is too much. Open it. She did, and inside found a tiny photograph of the two of them, taken by a traveling photographer who had passed through town in October. She barely remembered posing for it, but there they were, standing together in front of the general store, Samuel's hand on her shoulder and both of them looking slightly uncomfortable but undeniably together. So you will always remember this first year, he said softly. She threw her arms around his neck, not caring who might see. I love you, Samuel Dawson. I love you so much it frightens me sometimes. Good, he said, his arms tight around her waist. Because I am completely in love with you too, and it would be a shame if it was not mutual. They laughed together, and Amelia thought that she had never been so happy, not in all her life. But happiness, she had learned, was a fragile thing. Spring brought new challenges to the ranch. A late frost killed half her garden, and then a dry spell threatened the water supply. Samuel spent long hours riding the fence lines and moving cattle, coming home exhausted and worried. One evening in April, Charlie came to the house looking grim. We have got rustlers, boss. Lost about 20 head last night from the north pasture. Samuel's face hardened. You are certain? Tracks lead toward the border, at least 3 men, maybe 4. Amelia felt fear clutch at her chest. What will you do? We will track them, see if we can get the cattle back, Samuel said, already reaching for his rifle. Samuel, no, let them go. It is not worth risking your life over some cattle. He turned to her, and his expression softened. Amelia, those cattle represent months of work and money we need to keep the ranch running. I cannot just let them go. Then let the law handle it. Ride to Lordsburg and get the sheriff. By the time we get back, the trail will be cold. I am sorry, but I have to do this. He kissed her quickly. Charlie, Pete, and I will go. Johnny will stay here with you. We will be back in a few days. She wanted to argue, to beg him not to go, but she could see the determination in his face and knew it would be useless. Instead, she helped him pack supplies and checked his rifle herself, making sure it was properly loaded. You come back to me, she said fiercely as he mounted his horse. You promised to love only me, Samuel Dawson, and I am holding you to that. He leaned down and kissed her one more time. I promise, I will always come back to you. She watched them ride out, 3 figures growing smaller against the vast landscape, and prayed harder than she ever had in her life. The days that followed were the longest of Amelia's life. She threw herself into work, cleaning and cooking and tending the garden, but her mind was always on Samuel, wondering where he was and if he was safe. Johnny did his best to keep her spirits up, chattering about inconsequential things, but she could see the worry in his young face too. On the fourth day, she was hanging laundry when she heard the sound of hoofbeats. Her heart leaped and she ran toward the front of the house, praying it was Samuel returning. It was Charlie, alone, and her stomach dropped. "Where is Samuel?" she demanded before Charlie had even dismounted. "He is all right," Charlie said quickly, "but he is hurt. We caught up with the rustlers and there was a fight. Samuel took a bullet in the shoulder. Pete is bringing him back, but they are moving slow." Amelia did not wait to hear more. She ran to the barn and saddled a horse with shaking hands, ignoring Charlie's protests that she should wait. She had learned to ride in the month since coming to the ranch, though she was not particularly skilled at it, but fear made her bold. She rode out in the direction Charlie indicated, pushing the horse harder than she should have, her eyes scanning the horizon desperately. Finally, she saw them, 2 horses moving slowly toward the ranch. Pete was leading Samuel's horse, and Samuel was slumped in the saddle, his shirt dark with blood. "Samuel!" She urged her horse forward and pulled up beside them. His face was pale and drawn with pain, but he managed a weak smile when he saw her. "I told you I would come back," he said, his voice rough. "You are an idiot," she said, tears streaming down her face. "An absolute idiot." She looked at Pete. "How bad is it?" "Bullet went clean through. He has lost blood, but I do not think it hit anything vital. We need to get him home and cleaned up." They made it back to the ranch, and Amelia took charge with a competence she did not know she possessed. She had Pete and Charlie carry Samuel into the house and lay him on the bed. She boiled water and gathered clean cloths, then sent Johnny riding to town for the doctor. "The doctor is a day's ride away," Samuel protested weakly. "I do not need a doctor, just clean it and bandage it." "You are getting a doctor whether you like it or not," Amelia said firmly. She began carefully cutting away his bloody shirt, her hands surprisingly steady now that she had something to do. The wound was ugly, but, as Pete had said, it appeared the bullet had gone straight through. She cleaned it as gently as she could, trying not to flinch when Samuel gasped in pain. I am sorry," she murmured over and over. "It is all right," he managed. "You are doing fine." When she had it bandaged, she made him drink some whiskey for the pain and sat beside the bed holding his hand. "Did you get the cattle back?" she asked. "Most of them. The rustlers will not be bothering anyone again." He closed his eyes, exhausted. "I am sorry I scared you. You should be. When you are well, I am going to be very angry with you." He smiled faintly. "I am looking forward to it." The doctor arrived the next evening, a gruff man named Henderson who examined Samuel's wound and pronounced Amelia's care entirely adequate. "Keep it clean, watch for fever, and he should be fine in a few weeks, though he will have a scar." "I do not care about a scar," Amelia said. "As long as he lives." Samuel did live, though his recovery was slow. For 2 weeks, he was confined to bed, fretting about the ranch and driving everyone to distraction with his attempts to get up before he was ready. Amelia nursed him with fierce devotion, changing his bandages and forcing him to eat even when he claimed he was not hungry. One night, when he was finally starting to regain his strength, he reached for her hand in the darkness. "I have been thinking," he said quietly. "That is dangerous in your condition." He ignored her attempt at humor. "When I was out there tracking those rustlers, all I could think about was getting back to you. And when I got shot, my first thought was not about dying, but about breaking my promise to you, about leaving you alone." "Samuel, let me finish. I realized something. You are my family now, Amelia. Not children, not some future generation, but you. You are the person I want to build my life around, the person I want to share everything with." And maybe we cannot have children of our own, but that does not mean we cannot have a family. What do you mean? There are children who need homes. Orphans from the war, kids whose parents died crossing the plains, babies abandoned at missions. We could give them a home if you wanted to. Not to replace the children we cannot have, but because we have love to give and room in our lives. Amelia stared at him in the darkness, her heart so full she could barely breathe. Do you mean that? Every word. I want to build a life with you, Amelia, whatever shape that life takes. She kissed him, mindful of his injured shoulder, tasting salt and whiskey and love. Yes, she whispered against his lips. Yes, I would like that very much. Summer brought healing and new beginnings. Samuel's shoulder mended, though he never regained full strength in that arm, and he learned to compensate, delegating more to Charlie and the other hands. Amelia's garden flourished in the heat, providing vegetables for their table and enough extra to sell in town. In July, they made a trip to Santa Fe to visit the Catholic mission there. The nuns who ran the orphanage were kind but overwhelmed, caring for more than 30 children in cramped conditions. Sister Maria, the head of the mission, listened to their request with barely concealed relief. We have so many children in need of homes, she said, leading them through the mission. Some are very young, others almost grown. What are you looking for? Amelia and Samuel exchanged glances. They had discussed this at length during the long ride to Santa Fe, considering what they could handle and what would be fair to a child coming into their lives. We would be happy to meet whoever you think might fit well with us, Samuel said. We have a working ranch, so older children who could help out would be welcome, but we are also prepared to care for younger ones. Sister Maria nodded thoughtfully. I have someone in mind. Wait here, please. She returned a few minutes later with a boy of about 7 or 8, thin and dark-haired, with solemn brown eyes that seemed too old for his face. This is Diego. He came to us 6 months ago after his parents died of cholera. He is a good boy, quiet but very smart, and he has been helping in the garden. Hello, Diego, Amelia said gently, crouching down to his level. My name is Amelia, and this is my husband, Samuel. We have a ranch not too far from here with horses and cattle and a big garden. We were wondering if you might like to come live with us. Diego looked at her warily. Why? Because we have a home with room for a boy and you need a home, Samuel said simply. We cannot promise everything will be perfect, but we can promise we will take care of you and treat you fairly. Would I have to work? We would expect you to help out with chores appropriate for your age, Samuel said. But you would also have time to play and to go to school. There is a teacher in Lordsburg who holds classes in the church. Diego considered this. Would I have my own room? Yes, Amelia said, thinking of the empty bedroom next to theirs. Your own room with your own bed. All right, Diego said finally. I will try it. Sister Maria looked relieved. Wonderful, I will prepare his papers. As they rode back to Lordsburg with Diego sitting between them on the wagon bench, Amelia felt a strange mix of excitement and terror. They were responsible for this child now, for his well-being and his future. What if they failed him? What if they were not good parents? Samuel seemed to sense her thoughts. We will figure it out, he said quietly. Together. Diego proved to be a quiet, observant child who spoke little but took in everything. He explored the ranch with cautious interest, petting the horses gently and watching the cattle from a distance. At dinner that first night, he ate as though he expected someone to take the food away, and Amelia had to encourage him to have seconds. That night, she tucked him into the bed in his new room, a real bed with clean sheets and a quilt she had made herself. If you need anything in the night, our room is right next door, she told him. Do not be afraid to call out. He nodded but said nothing. She was about to leave when his small voice stopped her. "Mrs. Dawson, why did you want me? The sister said you cannot have children of your own." Amelia sat back down on the edge of the bed. "That is true. My body does not work the way it should in that regard. But Diego, just because you did not grow inside me does not mean you are not wanted or loved. My husband and I have a lot of love to give, and we wanted to share it with someone who needed a family. My parents loved me," he said, his voice trembling, "but they died anyway. I know, sweetheart, and I am so sorry that happened to you. I cannot promise that nothing bad will ever happen again, because life does not work that way. But I can promise that, for as long as we are here, we will love you and care for you as though you were born to us." A tear slid down his cheek, and then another, and suddenly he was crying in earnest, great heaving sobs that shook his small frame. Amelia gathered him into her arms and held him while he cried for all he had lost. When the storm finally passed, he pulled back and looked at her with red, swollen eyes. "I will try to be good." "You are already good," she assured him. "Now get some sleep. Tomorrow Samuel wants to teach you how to feed the chickens." The weeks that followed were an adjustment for everyone. Diego was clearly not accustomed to the routines of ranch life, and there were mishaps, like the time he left the chicken coop open, and they spent an hour chasing down wayward hens. But he was eager to learn and surprisingly resilient. Samuel proved to be a patient teacher, showing Diego how to care for the animals and handle basic ranch tasks. Amelia watched them together one afternoon, Samuel's hand on Diego's shoulder as he demonstrated the proper way to brush a horse, and felt her heart swell with love. In September, Diego started attending the small school in Lordsburg. Amelia would drive him into town 3 days a week and pick him up in the afternoon, using the time to shop and visit with the other women in town. She found herself part of a community in a way she had never been in Philadelphia, welcomed and accepted. One afternoon, as she waited for school to let out, a young woman approached her hesitantly. She was very pregnant, her belly swollen beneath her worn dress, and she looked exhausted and afraid. "Excuse me, madam," she said softly. "I heard you took in an orphan boy from the mission." "That is right. Diego is his name." The woman bit her lip. "I am Anna Foster. My husband died in a mining accident 2 months ago, and I am due to have this baby any day now. I already have 2 little girls, and I do not know how I am going to manage with 3 children and no money." Amelia's heart ached for her. "I am very sorry for your loss. Is there any way I can help?" "I know it is a terrible thing to ask, but if something happens to me in the birthing, would you consider taking my children? I have no family, and I am terrified they will end up in some institution somewhere." "Nothing is going to happen to you," Amelia said firmly, though she knew childbirth was dangerous, especially without proper care. "But yes, if the worst should happen, my husband and I would make sure your children are cared for." Anna Foster's baby came a week later, a healthy boy, but the mother did not survive the night. Amelia learned of her death from the doctor and immediately went to Samuel. "There are 3 children with no one to care for them," she said. "The oldest girl is 5, the younger one is 3, and the baby is just days old." Samuel looked at her steadily. "And you want to take them in?" "I promised their mother, but Samuel, this is different from Diego. This is 3 children, including an infant. That is a lot to ask." "Are you asking me?" She took a deep breath. "Yes, I am asking you if we can take these children and raise them as our own." He stood and paced the length of the kitchen, and she held her breath, waiting. Finally, he turned back to her. "When I said I wanted to build a family with you, I meant it. If these children need us, then yes, we will take them in. All 3 of them." Amelia threw her arms around him. "Thank you, thank you. We are going to need a bigger house," he said dryly, but she could hear the emotion in his voice. The foster children arrived the next day. The oldest, Mary, was a serious little girl with blonde braids who held her younger sister Clara's hand tightly. The baby, who Anna had named Joseph before she died, was tiny and red-faced and already crying. Diego watched their arrival with wide eyes. "Are they staying?" he asked. "Yes," Amelia said. "They are going to be your brother and sisters now. Do you think you can help me take care of them?" He considered this gravely, then nodded. "I can help." The house suddenly felt very full and very loud. The baby cried at all hours, needing to be fed and changed constantly. Mary had nightmares and would wake screaming for her mother. Clara sucked her thumb and refused to speak to anyone but her sister. Diego, overwhelmed by the chaos, retreated into himself. There were moments when Amelia thought she might break under the strain. She was exhausted, running on too little sleep and too much worry. Samuel helped as much as he could, but the ranch still needed running, and he could not neglect his responsibilities there. One particularly difficult night, with the baby screaming and both girls crying and Diego hiding under his bed, Amelia sank down on the kitchen floor and wept. Samuel found her there and sat down beside her, pulling her into his arms. "We are in over our heads," she said miserably. "Maybe a little," he agreed. "But we will figure it out. We always do." "How can you be so calm?" "Because I have you, and you are the strongest person I know. These children need us, Amelia. They need stability and love and a home. It is going to be hard, but nothing worthwhile is ever easy." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Samuel Dawson. I love you too. Now let me take the baby for a while. You go get some sleep." Gradually, slowly, they found their rhythm. Mary started to trust them, and her nightmares became less frequent. Clara began speaking again, chattering to Diego about everything and nothing. The baby settled into a routine of sorts, and Amelia learned to function on interrupted sleep. They built an addition onto the house that winter, 2 more bedrooms so each child could have their own space. Samuel taught Diego to ride properly, and Amelia showed Mary how to help in the garden. Clara followed Samuel around like a shadow, and he would lift her onto his shoulders and carry her while he did his chores. Spring came again, bringing new life to the ranch. The cattle had multiplied, and Samuel was able to hire 2 more hands to help manage the growing herd. The children thrived in the clear air and open spaces, growing brown and strong. One evening in May, nearly 2 years after Amelia had first arrived in Lordsburg, she and Samuel sat on the porch watching the children play in the yard. Diego was teaching the girls how to catch fireflies in the gathering dusk, and their laughter rang out clear and joyful. "You ever regret it?" Samuel asked quietly. Taking on so much so quickly, Amelia thought about the question seriously. Life was hard, there was no denying that. They had little money and less free time. The children required constant attention and care. The ranch demanded endless work. But when she looked at her family, at this strange, beautiful thing they had built together, she could not imagine wanting anything different. "Not for a moment," she said. "Do you?" "Never. Though I will admit there are days I miss when it was just the 2 of us and the house was quiet." She laughed. "Those days are long gone, true. But I would not change it. I told you I would love only you, Amelia, and I do. But my heart has grown bigger than I knew it could, big enough for all of you." "Mine too," she said softly. He took her hand, and they sat together in the fading light, watching their children chase fireflies and listening to their laughter echo across the land. The years rolled on, each one bringing its own challenges and joys. Diego grew into a lanky teenager, serious and hardworking, already talking about taking over the ranch someday. Mary became Amelia's right hand, helping with the younger children and learning to cook and sew and manage a household. Clara remained the wild one, preferring to work outside with the cattle rather than inside with domestic chores, and Samuel encouraged her, seeing no reason why a girl could not be a rancher. Joseph, the baby, grew into a cheerful, affectionate boy who charmed everyone he met. In 1885, when a young widow named Elizabeth arrived in Lordsburg with her infant daughter, Amelia and Samuel did not hesitate to take them in as well. The house was expanded again, the ranch grew more prosperous, and their family continued to increase in unexpected ways. People in town marveled at the Dawsons and their growing brood of adopted children. Some thought they were crazy, taking in every orphan and hard luck case that came along. But Samuel and Amelia never turned away a child in need, and their home became known as a place of refuge and love. On a warm evening in June of 1893, Amelia sat on the porch that had been expanded several times over the years, watching yet another sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. She was 50 years old now, her auburn hair streaked with gray, her hands worn from years of work. But she had never been happier. Samuel, his own hair mostly gray now and his shoulders stiff when the weather changed, came out and settled into the chair beside her with a contented sigh. The house behind them was full of noise, their children and now grandchildren filling every room. Diego had married a girl from town 3 years ago and had blessed them with 2 grandchildren already, with another on the way. Mary had become a teacher and lived in Lordsburg with her husband, bringing her own 2 children to visit every Sunday. Clara had, against all expectations, fallen in love with Charlie's nephew and was planning a wedding for the fall. Joseph, now 20, was courting seriously, and even Elizabeth's daughter, 17 now, had a young man calling on her. "We have done all right, have we not?" Samuel said, reaching for her hand. "We have done better than all right. We have built something remarkable." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Do you remember what I told you on our wedding day? You told me a lot of things on our wedding day. I told you that if you could not have children, I would love only you and it would be enough. I meant it then and I still mean it now. You have always been enough for me, Amelia. Everything else has been extra blessing, but you are the center of it all." Tears filled her eyes. After all these years, he could still move her to tears with his simple honesty. "I love you, Samuel Dawson. You gave me a life I never dreamed possible. We gave it to each other," he corrected, "and I would not change a single moment." They sat together as the stars began to appear, one by one, in the darkening sky. From inside the house came laughter and the sound of children arguing and the clatter of dishes being washed. It was the sound of life, messy and chaotic and absolutely perfect. Amelia thought back to that terrified young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach 15 years ago, carrying nothing but a carpet bag and a shameful secret. She had been so certain that her inability to bear children made her worthless, that no man could truly love her knowing the truth. How wrong she had been. Samuel had not just accepted her barrenness, he had built a whole new kind of family around it, one based not on blood but on choice and love. They had created something beautiful from what she had seen as her greatest failure. "What are you thinking about?" Samuel asked, watching her face in the lamplight spilling from the windows. "I am thinking that I am the luckiest woman alive. I came west expecting nothing but a marriage of convenience and a chance to escape my past. Instead, I found love and purpose and a family bigger than I ever imagined. I am the lucky one. You could have married anyone, Amelia. You could have found a younger man, a richer man, a man who could have given you an easier life, but you chose me. I would choose you again, every single time," she said fiercely. "In every life, in every circumstance, I would choose you." He pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather and soap and home. The ranch sprawled around them in the darkness, hundreds of acres that they had worked together to build and maintain. The cattle lowed in the distance, and somewhere a horse whinnied softly. "Grandma! Grandpa!" A small voice called from inside, and then Diego's oldest child, a 4-year-old boy named Thomas, came running out onto the porch. "Papa says it is time for the story." "What story is that, little one?" Amelia asked, though she knew the answer. It was the same every time the family gathered. "The story of how you and Grandpa fell in love, please." Samuel laughed and scooped the boy up onto his lap. "Again, we told it last week, but I like it, everyone does, and it was true." Their children and grandchildren never tired of hearing the story of the mail-order bride who confessed she was barren, and the cowboy who said he would love only her. It had become family legend, passed down and embellished with each telling. They went inside, where the family had gathered in the large main room. Diego and his wife, Mary and her family, Clara and her fiancé, Joseph with his sweetheart, Elizabeth and her daughter, and various ranch hands who had become like family over the years. They all settled in, the children on the floor, the adults in chairs, and on the sofa Samuel had surprised Amelia with on their 10th anniversary. "It started with a letter," Samuel began, and Amelia smiled, taking up the familiar tale. They told it together, as they did everything, trading off parts and filling in details. They spoke of fear and courage, of secrets and truth, of a promise made and kept. They talked about building a life together in the harsh but beautiful New Mexico territory, about learning to love and trust and open their hearts to possibilities they had never imagined. The children listened, rapt, even though they had heard it all before. Because it was not just a love story. It was the foundation of their family, the beginning of everything that had come after, when they finished, as they always did, with that first night on the porch watching the children chase fireflies. There was a moment of satisfied silence. Then Thomas piped up with a question. "Grandma, are you sad that you could not have babies?" The room went quiet, everyone waiting to see how she would answer. It was the question at the heart of everything, the source of both sorrow and unexpected joy. Amelia looked around the room at all the faces looking back at her, at this family that had come together in such an unconventional way. She thought about Mary's steady strength, inherited not from biology, but from years of working beside Amelia in the kitchen. She thought about Clara's wild independence, nurtured by Samuel's belief that girls could do anything boys could. She thought about Diego's quiet determination, and Joseph's joyful spirit, and Elizabeth's fierce protectiveness of her daughter. "I would be lying if I said I was never sad about it," she said honestly. "There were times, especially in the beginning, when it felt like the worst thing that could have happened to me. But Thomas, sweetheart, if I could have borne children, I would not have had any of you. I would have had different children, and they might have been wonderful, but they would not have been you." "So you are glad?" he pressed, with the blunt curiosity of the very young. "I am grateful for the path my life took, even though it was not the path I expected or the one I would have chosen at the time, because it led me here, to your grandfather and to all of you, and I cannot imagine anything better than this." Samuel reached for her hand and squeezed it gently. She squeezed back, a silent conversation passing between them as it so often did after all these years together. Later, after the family had dispersed to their various rooms and the house had finally settled into quiet, Amelia and Samuel lay in their bed, the same one they had shared since that first nervous wedding night. "You think we did right by them?" Amelia asked in the darkness. "All those children we took in, gave our name to, raised as our own. Look at them, Amelia. Look at who they have become. Diego is a better rancher than I ever was, and he is kind with it, which matters more. Mary is educating the next generation. Clara is going to break every rule about what women can and cannot do, and good for her. Joseph brings joy wherever he goes, and all of them know they are loved, truly loved, not as replacements for something we lost, but as the blessings they are. Yes, I think we did right by them. We were so young when we started, she mused. Well, I was young, you were practically ancient. He laughed and pulled her closer. I was 32, hardly ancient, though some days I feel it now. We both do. But Samuel, if you could go back, if you could change anything, would you? She felt him shake his head in the darkness. Not a thing. Every choice led us here, and here is exactly where I want to be, with you. Even the getting shot part. Well, maybe I could have skipped that part, but even that brought us closer, did it not? You nursing me back to health, threatening to be very angry with me when I recovered. I was terrified I would lose you. I know. I am sorry for that, but I am not sorry for fighting for what was ours, for protecting the life we were building. A man has to stand up for what matters. They drifted into comfortable silence, the kind that only comes after years of learning each other's rhythms and silences. Outside, a coyote called to the moon, and the wind whispered through the cottonwood trees Samuel had planted the year Diego arrived. Amelia thought about the young woman she had been, stepping off that stagecoach with nothing but fear and hope tangled together in her heart. She had been running from shame and loss, convinced that her worth as a woman was measured in her ability to bear children. It had taken Samuel, with his simple, stubborn love, to teach her differently. He had looked at her broken places and said they did not matter. He had seen past what she could not give him to what she could. Partnership, love, loyalty, and eventually a family built not on blood ties but on something stronger. Choice. Commitment. Love that expanded rather than diminished. Samuel, she whispered, thinking he might already be asleep. MMM. Thank you for loving only me, even when it became not just me. She felt his arms tighten around her. You are still the center, Amelia. Always have been, always will be. The children are the joy and the blessing, but you are the heart of it all. I fell in love with you before Diego, before Mary and Clara and Joseph and all the rest. I fell in love with you when you were brave enough to tell me the truth on our wedding day, and I have been falling deeper ever since. I love you, she said, the words as fresh and true as they had been 15 years ago in the garden when he first said them to her. I love you too. Now sleep. Tomorrow is Sunday, and you know the whole family will be here for dinner again. She smiled in the darkness and let herself relax into his embrace, into the life they had built together against all odds. Outside, the ranch settled into the peaceful rhythms of night, cattle and horses, and the wide New Mexico sky full of stars. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new reasons to be grateful for the unexpected paths life had taken them down. But tonight, Amelia Dawson closed her eyes and fell asleep in the arms of the man who had promised to love only her, and who had kept that promise every single day for 15 years. The cowboy who had looked at a barren woman and seen not what was missing, but what was there. The man who had turned her greatest shame into her greatest strength, who had shown her that family was not always about blood, that love was not finite but infinite, growing to encompass whoever needed it most. She had come west a broken, frightened woman with nothing to offer but her willingness to work hard and start over. She had found instead a man who saw her worth, a land that tested and strengthened her, and a family that grew from the most unlikely soil. And as sleep finally claimed her, Amelia's last conscious thought was that she would not change a single moment of the journey that had brought her here, to this place, to this man, to this beautiful, chaotic, perfect life. Their story had begun with a confession and a promise. It had unfolded into something neither of them could have predicted, richer and fuller than any dream. And as the stars wheeled overhead and the wind sang its ancient song across the desert, the Dawson Ranch slept, home to a family built on the simple but revolutionary idea that love was not about what you could produce, but about what you could give. Samuel and Amelia had given everything they had, and in return, they had received more than they ever imagined possible. Not the life they had planned, but the life they were meant to live, together. And that, in the end, was all that mattered.